The fact is, that's what our military is for, to protect us, the American citizens, from bad people out in the world who would hurt us.
The Pentagon constantly fails audits. It has misplaced trillions of dollars.
Israel is just trying to live.
When you just say a blanket statement, like we should protect American citizens and not illegal aliens,
Should not be here in the first place. The middle class is where the money is. The
hard
rich-
disagree. Are you kidding me? Well, what are the coal miners going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, work somewhere else.
Healthy debate
Requires constructive dialogue.
Join me, Joe Pangaro,
And me, Andrew Dunn.
as we find harmony in contrast.
And resolution through challenge.
Exchange.
Truth seek. This is Perspective Exchange.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Perspective Exchange. With me, I'm your host, Joe Pangaro, with my partner, Andrew Dunn. We come from the right and the left, and we try to bring different ideas and thoughts to you so that we can all take a good look at what's going on.
As my friend Joe here said, I am Andrew Dunn, co-hosting today. And without further ado, let's jump right into our first main topic. Our anti-war president has invaded yet another country. Did his peace prize from the International Federation of Association Football mean nothing to him? In an event that I am calling Operation Epstein Smokescreen, and for anyone concerned that this is going to be a second Iraq war, don't you worry. This is completely different. First of all, the federal government is saying we're only going to be in Iran for 4 weeks. They told us Iraq was only going to take 5 days. It's totally different. Additionally, we went into Iraq because we thought they had weapons of mass destruction. We attacked Iran because they might have weapons of mass destruction. Someday. In the future. Eventually. Iran currently has no nukes. They don't even have long-range missiles. And with no long-range missiles, the U.S. is safely out of reach from any Iranian strikes. Because, as a flock of seagulls famously said, Iran, so far away. Joe, what do you think about the Trump administration's most recent invasion of Iran?
All right, so I think we have a bigger picture here, as we normally do when it comes to anything that's going on here. To look at an individual moment in time and say the invasion of Iran is in and of itself problematic. So I think I first want to address, the no war president. Now, no extended wars is a good thing, I think, for any American president. Who wants to get into a long-term World War II, 5 years? Who wants to get into the Iraq War, many, many, many years? But the reality is we have to pay attention to the fact that the rest of the world is not America. We live here with our freedoms. We can argue about our freedoms. We don't have our freedoms. We're oppressed. We're not oppressed. We have the most free country that has ever been on the face of the earth. The rest of the world is not America. Iran is an absolute threat to the rest of the world based on what they have done already, and not just in the last 3 weeks, not since the bombers came over and tried to take out did take out their nuclear facilities. This goes back almost 50 years. I was a young person when the Shah was deposed and the Ayatollah Khomeini took over and immediately changed Iran, which is a country that had education. Women were doctors, they were lawyers. It was almost a Western country with great culture and great history. And the Islamic Revolution drove them back into the Stone Age. Their goal since that time, and the theocratic government that they have, is to destroy Israel and to destroy the United States of America. This is their stated goal. I've always believed that when your enemy tells you they're going to do something, you have to look at it seriously and believe them. Now, if there was no incidents whatsoever, either in the short term recently or in the long term, the last almost 50 years, since 1979, if there were no incidents you could point to and say, well, no, Iran is just, they're having their country, they're doing what they want to do. It's their country. The people there can revolt if they want. They can keep the country the way it is if they want. They can do whatever they want. The fact is they have exported terrorism around the world. Americans have died since 1979 at the hands of the Iranian government. They have been a thorn in the side of the world. They foment the troubles in the Middle East that have led to thousands of deaths So when we look at it that way, we say, okay, do we let it just keep riding? It's been fine 50 years. So we lose some Americans here and there. They kill some people. They fly into some buildings. They pay for terrorists to kill Israelis. Okay, status quo. Nothing for us to really do here. But the reality is their goal was to get a nuclear weapon. And you have to say to yourself, well, what's the chances they would use a nuclear weapon? Well, let's just look at the tail end of what's been going on so far at this moment. Here they are. They've been devastated by American and Israeli air power, shut down. Their leadership has been wiped out 2-3 levels deep. You think a person with some kind of brain in their head would say, okay, we need to negotiate an end to this because this is not going to go well. We need to find a way to survive or to do something different than what we've been doing because we've been destroyed. Instead, they're taking the missiles that they do have and they're launching them not only at Americans, at American ships, but they're launching them at their own friends and allies, which tells you very clearly if they had a nuclear weapon, they would not hesitate to light up Tel Aviv, put it on a ship. What if they just took their enhanced uranium at 60%, which they don't need for nuclear power, and put it on some Scud missiles on a ship 20 miles off of New York City or Boston and let that go? They've made it very clear they are a danger to each and every one of us. And they're getting closer and closer to the point we can't stop them if we don't do it now.
So I think that it's important to bring up right now. The Wall Street Journal actually just did an interesting piece on the invasion of Iran. And this is run by Rupert Murdoch, who's about as right-wing as you can get. And he has, well, not him, but the piece that came out for the Wall Street Journal has said, quote, U.S. officials and lawmakers with access to classified information, along with experts who have spent their careers poring over public data and government reports, say the administration's assertions are incomplete, unsubstantiated, or flat out wrong. You know, I'm reminded as well, John Fetterman was recently just asked why he supports the war in Iran. And he said, well, you know, it's the right thing to do. And they said, well, how is this going to help people? How is this going to help your constituents? And he said, basically, we're done with this interview. It is very difficult for the people who are in favor of invading Iran to describe to someone like me and to explain to someone like me why we're there and how this is going to help us. I also want to point out that the purpose for the invasion before the war, well, I don't know. There's some discrepancy on whether or not we're calling this a war, because if it's a war, then the Trump administration committed a crime because they can't go to war without Congress's say so. So maybe it's not a war, maybe it is. We haven't really seen it enough to be able to tell. But before this invasion happened, the reasons for invading were to destroy Iran's ballistic missiles, which is kind of crazy in itself, because asking a country, you know, saying to any country, you're not allowed to have missiles. And this is not long-range missiles. This is just anything they can use to defend themselves in case someone invades them, a la the United States, but also like destroying Iran's nuclear enrichment program, which they have said multiple times is not about making a weapon of war. And I know that you're going to say, are you really going to trust Iran? No, that's why we keep a close eye on what they're doing. We already were able to tell that they were building a nuclear enrichment facility, and Trump 9 months ago blew it up because we were able to tell. We have ways of finding these things out. And it seems as though, however, that enrichment facility was for creating a nuclear power plant, which would be for the purposes of medicine and electricity, which would, you know, I don't see anything wrong with them having that. In fact, there's another piece of the Wall Street Journal that I want to read as well, which is Iran does have uranium that could be enriched around the 1 week time frame to make it usable for a nuclear weapon. The issue is Iran appears to have no enrichment facility where cascades of centrifuges are assembled to enrich the material to weapons grade. Iran would also have to get access to the stockpile, which would very possibly be tracked. And even if Iran did get weapons-grade uranium, it would still have to assemble scientists, produce uranium material, and build it inside a nuclear device, all without being caught while doing so. Additionally, other things from before this invasion, other reasons that we invaded, were to end Iran's relationship with proxy groups and for regime change, even though Pete Hegseth has said this is not a regime change war. That's not the reason we're doing this. And then after the invasion, they came out with a few more ideas, which was more reasons, which were destroying Iran's improvised explosive devices, which IEDs, which are mainly roadside bombs, destroying Iran's entire navy and ending Iran's 47-year-long war against the US. If we're going to be in Iran until we can get rid of all of the roadside bombs that they have, and until their entire navy is disbanded, I don't see us leaving here anytime soon, even though the Trump administration has said this is only going to take 4 weeks. I just have difficulty believing that.
Okay, so as far as their navy, I think their navy, their surface ships have been converted into submarines in the last couple of days. I think they said they've sunk 14 ships, and I don't know the size of their navy. It's
And it
not like
only
the
cost
American
us
Navy.
6 Americans.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. The loss of any American life is something we all have to consider anytime we send anyone out to do danger. I was a law enforcement officer, and I know every single day that I went to work, when I said goodbye to my wife and children, I knew that part of my commitment to my career and to my community was that I could get killed in the line of duty. That was a reality. And police officers get killed every single day all across the country. They'd make the ultimate sacrifice for their communities. The men and women in our military service are absolute true American heroes and patriots, and they understand the same thing. You know, a couple of years ago, there was a big push that we saw a lot of these people saying, hey, I signed up for the military so I could get the education. I didn't sign up to go to war. You know, to quote the great Rush Limbaugh, the purpose of the military is to break things and kill people and extend our power to stop bad people from doing bad things to us. You can argue you don't like America, they're bad too. But the fact is, that's what our military is for, to protect us, the American citizens, from bad people out in the world who would hurt us. When we look at what's going on here, to say Iran just wanted nuclear power, you cannot trust them for any reason.
I don't think anyone is saying to trust them.
But to trust them would be to say, well, this time they're not going to go any further. They are going to go behind the scenes, just like North Korea did. The purpose of making agreements, the reason these negative, and I don't want to say evil, but in some instances people could make a case, these governments, these axes of evil, make these agreements with people in the West is so that they can buy time to continue doing the bad things that they're doing, right? It's like Chamberlain. The West thinks, oh, we're going to go in and talk with Hitler. It comes out with a paper, and all that did was allow him to buy time to send the world into world war. Well, the exact same thing is happening when you see people that have made it clear what they're going to do, not because you just don't like them or you think their culture is not equal to yours. No, when you see the actual things they do, you talk about IEDs. How many thousands of American military personnel have no legs, no arms, no faces because of IEDs? Allowing them to continue is just going to allow them to build a weapon that at some point we cannot stop them. North Korea, what can we do about them now? If they decided they're going to take the South, they will light up a nuclear weapon. So we basically have lost the options we would have had prior to them getting that weapon. Iran is in the middle of the Middle East, which is an important area of the world, and they are exporting terror and fomenting trouble and destruction that is not just kept to their country. They're not just protecting their country. They are trying to create a caliphate, an Islamic caliphate. We don't talk about that in this country because everyone's squeamish. Well, every religion is good. Every religion is good. And, don't be a hater. It's not about hater. Listen to what people say. Now, I know lots and lots of people who are Muslim that are good, decent people, and they practice their religion, and they would never hurt anybody. But there is a huge faction, and we're seeing it every single day, that is twisting that religion, if that's what you want to say, and using it against us, flying planes into buildings, killing thousands of people, killing babies, burning them in ovens. This is real. And to pretend that it's not real and we don't need to do something, I think is foolish in the long run, because once they get that weapon, there's no going back. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. They did not come forward and say, we don't need nuclear weapons. We offered to give them nuclear power plants. No, they wanted to do it on their own. They were lying. They're trying to build a nuclear weapon so that they can wield that power and control the rest of us.
I hear you. Frankly, from what I've seen, especially from I think he's the foreign minister of Iran, I just think there is another way other than spending hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars, even on a 4-week war, than, other than invading a country to make sure that this doesn't happen, especially since by all accounts, it looks like it would take at minimum 10 years before, even if that was their intention, before they could even begin to get to that point. To me, I just don't see war for me, and invasions for me are a break glass in case of emergency. And I think that's what Trump ran on as well. And I think a lot of his base is a little disappointed that he seems to have been using the military to invade so many different places, to overthrow so many regimes. And we don't, as Americans, we don't have a lot of good history with overthrowing regimes in the Middle East. I'm reminded of, we put Saddam Hussein into power and then immediately took him down. I'm reminded of, the not overthrowing, I guess, but the deaths of Al-Qaeda bringing forth ISIS, because these kids, for better or worse, saw their parents die at the hands of the American government and then were raised to believe that, the Americans are evil. So now, what do we have now? We have basically Al-Qaeda 2.0, and we have a new terrorist regime because we are trying to dip our fingers into the cookie jar and, manufacture regimes as we see fit. And I'm just so worried about another Iraq, because Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, estimated that the Iraq War would last 5 days. It lasted almost 10 years. It cost nearly $3 trillion and took over half a million lives. So, man, it makes me really nervous to start invading countries again. And I know that we did this with Venezuela and it turned out okay, but I think you're rolling the dice every single time you do this.
I'm not going to disagree with you. You are rolling the dice. You are trying to remove a cancer that doesn't want to be removed. That cancer will metastasize if we do not do something about it. Now, is this the right moment to do it? Did it catch us up by surprise that all of a sudden we have to do something now? The reality is we went in to knock out their ability to create a nuclear weapon. That's what the bombing was months ago, the deep pocket bombing, and that was good. But what did we see them do? We saw them immediately try to repair those plants and get going back to build a nuclear weapon. How many times are we going to sit here and watch them do that before one time they get enough for one or two or three? Maybe they even have additional places we don't know about. What if North Korea sends them the material and ships it over to them because they're in cahoots? What do we do then? So while I do say to you, I don't want some long war. Nobody does. We don't want soldiers dying. We don't want to be involved for trillions of dollars. But at the same time, how many times do you allow your neighbor to wield a shotgun in his front yard and threaten your family and say, I'm going to kill you one of these days. I'm going to get you. First chance I get, I'm going to get you. Before you go in and say, we can't live like this anymore. Because it's not that they haven't done it, but they shot the neighbors on the other side of the street. And then they gave the gun to a guy and told him to go shoot the guy on the other side of the street. And every day they start their day by going, I'm going to kill you. You have to believe these people when they say it. And therefore, how long do you wait until they do something to us that we cannot stop? So I don't want this to go on either. And I think I was on social media the other day and I wanted to write something. And you got to be careful what you write out there because people overreact. But the state of peace is what I think we all want. State of peace is the way we should live with each other throughout the world. But I think the reality and the way I see it is that if we hope for peace so much, even in the face of people who do not want peace and who threaten you, but you hope that it's going to be peaceful, you open yourself up to grave danger.
I think the saying is you can hope in one hand and crap in the other and see which one will fill up faster.
That's not as articulate as I would like to say it, but you know what I'm saying. Sitting around hoping that, that's Chamberlain with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we have to understand the rest of the world is not America. We are good and decent people. We are good and decent people. We want to do what's right. We believe in justice and all. The rest of the world does not. And when we try and take American values and project it onto people who have said every single day when they start their government day, death to America, death to Israel, And then they send out terrorists across the world and they fund terrorists that kill thousands of people. And we sit here and go, well, yeah, they don't really mean us. They're not really going to do it. This is foolish. This is how we get hurt. And sometimes I think you have to make the decision that how far are you going to let your enemy go before they do hurt you?
Yeah, and good news and bad news with this invasion. The good news that I think we'll both agree on is the Grand Ayatollah, whose name I have written here, but I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I cannot. Dead at 86 years old, and I've written here, presumably while unwrapping a Werther's original, when a missile hit him in his home, killing him. That being said, and evidently there's an investigation going into this, but I've heard that a lot from this administration of, oh, we're going to run an investigation into this or that or whatever, and it never seems to bring anything up, so we'll see what happens. And a school was hit that ended up killing 165 students, including 57 young girls. We don't even know who fired that missile, if it came from the U.S. or if it came from Israel. I feel like we would know if it came from us. So my guess is it probably came from Israel, but
that's horrific.
That's real bad.
And I'll tell you, the difference between it being horrific, which it is, if a school was hit and children were killed, that is absolutely horrible. The intent behind it, if the intent was to blow up a school to hurt people, now you're talking evil. If a missile went awry in a war zone, that's horrific. But if they were not a danger where we had to shoot missiles, that's a different kind of a thing. It's still horrible, but it was an intent. Now, I think in Gaza, there was a hospital blown up that the whole world jumped all over Israel. Israel blew up the hospital.
Yeah.
And it turns out, no, it was actually a Hamas rocket that misfired and blew up the hospital.
Okay, I will just add, Israel has hit many, many hospitals and schools in Gaza, almost every hospital.
Well, and I'm going to say, where do they put their weapons and what do they use human shields? Have you ever heard that term?
Sure, but I don't know that we need to blow up
purpose?
the human shield too. I feel like there must be a better way to do this than to
look at
spray
World War
and
II.
pray.
Did we bomb Japanese cities and kill civilians? Horrific. We had to end the war. In Germany, did we do that? Yes. Because you have to end the war. You have to end the conflict. And human conflict is probably one of the most heart-wrenching things to have to see. But the reality is, if schools were hit and things are hit because people are using them as shields so that they can fire rockets at the civilian population of Israel, or if they were to do that to us, that is where it starts. And it's terrible and horrible. And you don't want any innocent children, people, anybody to get hurt. But you got to look at, where did it start? Who started it and who is causing that to happen? The Israelis are not evil. Let's just go blow up some schools in Hamas. Let's go blow up some things in Gaza. Let's just blow up schools in Iran. We're doing this because they have done something evil and they're coming after us, and we are defending ourselves.
I think it is very different though than, you brought up Japan in World War II. They bombed Americans, like they came to us and bombed us, and we begrudgingly were like, okay, fine, you've turned our hand, now we have to address this. As opposed to Israel, who is already getting billions of dollars from us every single year for military funding, we are now also helping them in their conflicts.
If you've made it this far into the episode, click the subscribe button.
You don't want to miss out on our future discussions, which is, I don't know, to me it seems unnecessary, especially, we can get into as well the allocation of resources, including, the United States provides approximately $3.8 billion in annual military aid to Israel, and we're in Iran to help Israel. And I feel like for us doing this, they should be either paying us or at least giving us a discount on what we're providing to them. And I've heard from many people on the right that we have a moral obligation to attack Iran, but I also think we have a moral obligation to help American citizens. And currently the military budget is nearly $1 trillion, with 2027 proposals raising it to $1.46 trillion. And the Pentagon constantly fails audits. It has misplaced trillions of dollars. We lost $300 million in a single friendly fire incident in Kuwait when thankfully the pilots were fine, but 3 American ships were shot down because they thought that they were the bad guys and they were us instead. Nearly 1 million people are homeless, including more than 32,000 veterans. Nearly half of the country is in some form of medical debt. 2/3 of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. Like you brought up the the metaphor of, your neighbor or whatever. I feel like we're helping the bouncer throw out a belligerent drunk through the front door while the kitchen is on fire.
Well, a lot of points you have there, Andrew, and I think we need to define what we're not looking at apples and apples. Israel is not creating wars and using the money we give them, the weapons we give them, to belligerently go and attack innocent people. They are responding to being attacked. If everyone would leave them alone and let them live, you have Arabs and you have Muslims in the Israeli government. How many Israelis are in the Hamas government? How many Israelis are in any of the other governments in the Middle East? None. Israel is just trying to live, and they are allowed to defend themselves. They are a democracy in the middle of a place that's not. They are our partner. Morally, we have a historical connection to them. If all of these countries that attack them blow up their citizens, constantly going after them, if they would stop and just live in their own borders and leave them alone, there'd be none of this. So to equate that the Israelis fought back and blew up a building inadvertently is not the same as terrorists trying to blow up, going into the kibbutzes in southern Tel Aviv in Israel and murdering 1,200 people at a concert and people in their bedrooms.
I hear what you're saying.
That is a different world, and we can't make them moral equivalents. And
for
that's
sure,
where we go wrong.
I want to point out though that like what you're talking about is like if these people who are under occupation, specifically I'm talking about Palestine now, under occupation from Israel would just let things go, would just like live and let live, everything would be fine. And it's like, yeah, but they are standing up against people who are occupying them.
Well, hang on a second. When you say occupy, Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2006, dragged their own people out of their houses and said, we're turning this over to the people of
except
Palestine.
Israel still runs a lot of the imports and exports, a lot of the...
But that's not the same as here's your land. Here's your chance to make this a paradise on the Mediterranean. And they even dug up their ancestors and moved them. And this is your place. And how did they respond? By turning that into a paradise by the sea where the world would send billions of dollars in to make it a beautiful place to visit? No, they built tunnels to go over and kill Israelis.
I think
this is where we get lost in this and we forget what's going on. This is not just two people fighting.
I agree with you to an extent on that specifically. The first thing that I always tell people when it first happened, when the very first, the concert invasion, is that anyone who tells you that this conflict is not complicated is lying to you. Anyone who says it's not complicated, Israel's in the right, is lying to you. Anyone who says it's not complicated, Palestine is in the right, is lying to you. It is an extremely murky and nuanced issue that is extremely complex. That being said, it also feels like the way I've always described it as well is, there's a really big kid on the playground and there's a really little kid on the playground. And the really little kid on the playground went over to the really big kid and he slapped him really hard across the face. And we all went, why did you do that? And then the really big kid knocked the little kid down and punched him, and then punched him again, and then punched him again, and then punched him again, and keeps hitting him over and over and over again. And we're like, what are you doing? Comparing, like you said, it's not apples and apples. Comparing Israel to Palestine, the amount of just military budget is nowhere near comparison between the two of them. And so I absolutely have sympathy for Israel when they're like, look, man, we were just sitting here and they came in and invaded. And I'm like, yes, they did. And that was years ago. And now can we stop bombing the hospitals and bombing schools and killing people? There's so many accounts of people, of civilians just sort of walking up and like, well, we don't know if you're a civilian or a terrorist or what, so we're just going to shoot you in the head. There has to be a middle ground somewhere. There has to be an in-between.
The answer is really very simple, even in a very complicated problem. All the people marching in the streets around the world carrying Palestinian flags and anti-Israel, turn your attention to Hamas and tell them, lay down your weapons, come out, and let the world help you build a paradise and not a hellhole. Stop killing your neighbors. They killed their own people the minute the Israelis pulled out in the most recent conflict. They went around and killed people who cooperated. This is a culture of death, not a culture of life. And until you change that mindset, no matter how much we want things to be right and fair, you have a one side that does not care about your fairness, does not care about stopping it. It cares about killing the people they don't like. And they do that at all costs. They raise their children to grow up to kill. All Hamas has to do is lay down weapons, accept Israel, most of the rest of the world does, and then we find a way to get along. And money will pour into that place. Their lives will change. There'll be no more bombs. There'll be no more hospitals blowing up. There'll be peace. But it's not, well, both sides have to be at peace. Stop attacking Israel. How many times would America allow Mexico or Canada to attack us and then say, well, just, let it be? We would not do that. And that's what's happening over there. And it's horrible that these things happen. You don't want to see it at any time, but it is the inevitable reaction to a war climate when people are trying to fight for their lives.
Well, you did say that, those of us who are more on the side of Palestine, we should tell them to lay down their guns. We'll write a letter, but I don't know how much English they speak, so I don't know if it's gonna, I don't know how much good it's going to do.
And the last thing I think I want to bring up, you brought up a point, and I think it's good because it shows us how we see things differently. All right, so when we went and we bombed Japan in World War II, and specifically civilian populations, we dropped a nuclear weapon, 2 of them, on Japan to stop that war. And then we bombed Germany, and civilians were killed to bring that war to an end. And your response was, well, they came to us and did this and that and the other thing. That's exactly, look at all the soldiers that have been killed. Look at the Cole, the USS Cole, the barracks bombing, the buildings that got blown up in New York, and a field in Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon.
That was not
and
Iran.
It goes on. No, but they fund this kind of stuff. They push this out ideologically. And that is the whole problem, is that we're looking at it as, well, individual acts, can we attribute to them? They are causing this friction to enhance. And that is one of the reasons of getting rid of them and of the leaders and all of their capability to wage any kind of a war.
Sure.
And then it's up to the people of Iran to go in and go, we're going to do something better.
Yeah. I personally think that we need to hold federal spending on anything that doesn't directly help the American people currently. Like, we need to freeze that, including additional spending on ICE and border control, with which the Democrats are currently holding hostage. Right now, there is a DHS funding dispute going on, and they are just at an absolute standstill because the funding, there's a proposal from the right. The left doesn't like it, largely because of border control and ICE funding that's in there. Chuck Schumer has said it's very easy for them to get all of this funded. Simply agree to our common sense proposals on ICE and border patrol. Schumer told reporters that after a closed door conference meeting, and he said, in terms of our negotiations, look, we're still far apart. I think that, it is possible, and I dare say easy, to separate the pieces. Because right now the right is saying, like, look, the TSA doesn't have funding right now. Like, we need to fund these programs that are in this, that are part of DHS. I think the smart thing to do right now is to just separate those so that so departments like TSA and other departments that they can work through the funding negotiations for ICE and border control separately. But no one is agreeing to do that. I will also add, Secret Service is still receiving payments. What do you think about all of this?
Well, let's take a look here. And again, when I talk about bigger picture, you look at it, it is a weapon. The shutdown is a weapon. ICE is funded already through the big, beautiful bill. So what we're doing is we're shutting down the TSA, we're shutting down Homeland Security, all these other things. We're screaming and hollering that right now we're worried that Iranian terror cells that are here in the country may activate and kill civilians. We may have a lone wolf like we had in looks like in Austin, Texas, go and attack people and start killing them. Let's look at this whole picture and say, well, first of all, why are you worried about people that you let in without vetting? Millions of people. What was the purpose of that? That was to maintain power. They talk very nicely, our friends on the left, about loving and caring for people who just want a better life. And I get it. If I was in one of those, I'd want to come too. But the reality is they opened our borders. They let millions of people in, including thousands of known terrorists that we can't find, plus 2 million gotaways that are nowhere ever. And now they're worried about terror cells being activated. Well, if you didn't let them in, we wouldn't have to worry about that. Shutting down the government is a power tool because what do we always hear as this goes through? Well, we'll blame it on them. If we can get are the American people so stupid that you can't see through this and realize this is a ploy that's been used multiple times? It's been used against you, not so your life will be better, so that they can have political power. And that's on both sides. I'm not going to say both sides wouldn't use it. But the reality is we see that happening. Do I think we should take care of American citizens? Absolutely. So just like President Trump, when he had his State of the Union, and he said, can we all agree, if you agree, stand up, that our first responsibility is to protect the American citizens, not illegal aliens. And all the Republicans applauded and stood up, and all the Democrats sat down. And if it was just a comment that was made, you couldn't differentiate what did they mean. They were specifically asked, if you think Americans come first, stand up. They did not. Inherent in that answer is Americans don't come first. Illegal aliens come first. There is billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been spent on illegal aliens. I'm not against immigration. We need immigration, right? We have to have a good system so that we vet who comes in and people come in that can bring something of value to our country. It's not just an open door. Everybody gets to come in and take from us. But the reality is there's billions and billions of dollars that have been spent on illegal aliens. And what's the purpose of bringing them in? They're bringing them in so that there's power. People aren't thinking, if you have all these millions of extra people in certain political districts, you raise up the number of votes they're going to get because people are voting illegally. Not everywhere, but they are. And number two, how many congressional seats are there? So if controlling that Congress and that power means 4 million extra people voting in a couple of districts adds 3 or 4 more seats, that takes over the Congress. This is a political play. This is not to help innocent, struggling people or to help you and me. This is politics, and we are being played by these politicians. And that's where there's money there. Help our veterans. These 4 or 6 people who have died, these soldiers in this conflict in Iran, they should be taken care, their families should be taken care of forever for what they did. People who came illegally from South America, as much as their plight might be tough, they shouldn't be taken care of.
I have to cut you off right there and bring up that what you're talking about is, I have the quote right here because we were going to bring it up later, but Trump said at the State of the Union, where did he say it? I've got it here. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, to protect them, not illegal aliens. Do you think that you worked in law enforcement. Do you think that it was not, like, if you had to choose between one person, saving one person and saving another person, should you have, wait. Are you a citizen? No? All right, I'm going to save this guy. That's not really how this works.
Apples and oranges, Andrew. You're talking an emergency situation where someone's being injured or there's a fire in a house. Well, they're illegals. We're not going to spend our fire. That's not the same as
I hear you. I want to add
here.
as well to what I was saying, though, that specifically the Constitution is very, very clear. There are some times where it says citizens and sometimes where it says people. Every person gets, I think when you paint a broad brush like Trump did at the State of the Union, that's where it gets difficult for a lot of people. Because he didn't say, like, we should take care of the families of fallen veterans who were American citizens and not undocumented immigrants. That's not what he said. That would have, I don't know, they probably would have gotten more confusion from the left than anything, but they would have been more in agreement with that. When you just say a blanket statement, like, we should protect American citizens and not illegal aliens, you're not going to get applause from me either. And I do want to point out as well that there were a ton of things when Joe Biden, this is another thing that, like, whenever there are, we talked about this when we were talking about the government standoff where the government was closing. And that it's, the right does it, the left does it. Whenever the left is in power, the right does it. Whenever the right's in power, the left does it. When Joe Biden was president, he gave the State of the Union. He had a statement where he said, no billionaire should pay a lower tax rate than a teacher, a sanitation worker, or a nurse. And not a single Republican stood, and everyone else stood and clapped for that. So, yeah, that's what's going to happen. They're not going to stand and applaud for the policy platforms that the other side has, because those aren't specifically priorities for them. And again, I think when it's a blanket statement like that, I disagree as well.
Well, I have to look at it, and I think, parsing words is what politicians do. When you look at the word in that whole thing that Trump said, to protect, what does it mean to protect? How do you, what does protect mean? Does it protect mean homeless American citizens who are living in the street and they don't have food or health care? Protecting them, does that mean providing for them as opposed to providing for illegal aliens? And we don't have the money then
Well, and
for
maybe
them?
that's where the line is in a different place. Because
But
to me,
I
it
have to
depends
say,
on what the Constitution and the law says.
it was pretty clear to me that his question was very simple. He was trying to draw a line. Who's more important here, American citizens or illegal aliens?
And I think it depends on what you're talking about, right? And that's the issue, is that he didn't make that very clear. It was clear to you because you understand this guy, you understand this party, you are already tapped into that. But for those of us who heard him talking about the rapists and the murderers who are coming from Mexico, we're like, what are you talking about? So no, like, we're not going to stand and applaud that because we don't quite know. Is this the same guy who, kicked blind people out of his buildings because he didn't want Braille written on the elevator buttons, or the things he said about Native Americans who run casinos and stuff? This guy has said things, and as well as anyone else, he says a lot of stuff, and he doesn't always put it to heart, and it's not always part of his policy platforms or whatever. But you never quite know with the guy. So I think that's part. We talk about this all the time on the show about the fear of. I think we're all everyone on the left is like, we're all a little nervous about the things that he says. And so until he clarifies, well, what I'm talking about is not necessarily the protections we have in the Constitution and the law that say explicitly that everyone deserves this, that, or the other, and that they all deserve a fair trial. And, if a law is broken or a person who is undocumented is injured because of someone hitting him with a car or whatever, that person is still going to be prosecuted or whatever it is.
Yes.
Do you understand?
I understand what you're saying. I agree. The Constitution, you have constitutional rights when you're in American soil if you're going to get arrested, if you commit a crime. And that's what the Constitution covers. The reality is that people that should not be here in the first place are taking resources from American citizens. Now, you can argue 1,000 different ways. And when I say that, people say that's so cold, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be here. They're not American citizens. They came across the border illegally because it's better here than where they're from. I get it. I would probably want to do the same thing if I lived where they did. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it okay.
I will add to what you're saying, though, just to push back a little bit. Most of the numbers that are coming out now, even from bipartisan organizations, do note that the more people you have working in a country, even if it's not on the books, even if they're not paying income tax, does still pay. It improves a lot of the quality of the economy because you have people who are improving GDP. You have people who are paying sales tax, and generally speaking, you have people who are paying rent, even if it's not on the books. There is money moving, and if you eliminate a lot of that, I think that's part of it, is that they are still a net positive for the most part because of, and a lot of them also pay income tax, which honestly, they don't really need to. If you're already going to be undocumented, you can be undocumented, but a lot of them do pay back into income tax, and they are paying into things, especially with things like sales tax, into things that they do not benefit from. They can't benefit from Social Security and stuff like that, which they're paying into.
And to agree with a small part of what you're saying, that's true. I knew people who were illegal and they paid with fake Social Security numbers, and their employer took money out and they never got to collect. Doesn't change the paradigm. They shouldn't be here anyway. And if they helped the economy so much, why aren't their economies where they come from booming?
Because there's fewer
people
people
there.
We have almost 400 million people.
Right, but they could make a beautiful economy there. At one point, we only had 1 million people here, and we turned it into the biggest, most robust economy the world has ever known.
We had more space and resources as well.
See, there's always a reason.
Yeah,
there's always a reason.
There is.
But the reality is, it's not the same. It's just not the same. And there's the money for the homeless, for the veterans. Not all the money, but there's a lot of it. The military budget, every time we have a Democrat president and Congress, one of the first things they do is they cut the military. And then our enemies around the world see that as weakness. They start to rise up. Our friends on the left and the last bunch of presidents, I got to say, on the right too, they do a lot of talking, a lot of kicking down the road. They don't address things. When we had a Ronald Reagan, he changed the paradigm of the world and destroyed the Soviet Union. It fell apart because of his stand. Then we've had a bunch of weak presidents, Republican and Democrat, who kick the can down the road and let's just make nice and we're all good. Now you have a guy like Trump that comes in and says, enough. The rest of the world is going to pay its fair share. America is not to be kicked around. and we are going to stand up for our people and do what's right. And if you're a danger to us, we're going to tell you to stop.
Oh.
If you don't, we're going to go over and make you stop.
For sure. And speaking of political standoff, since that was just looping it back around to what we were talking about before, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is in a standoff with New York State Governor Kathy Hochul regarding raising taxes on the rich. Mamdani wants to raise taxes on the city's richest residents, but he can't without state approval. He said in a recent video that if Hochul doesn't raise taxes on the rich, he will be forced to raise property taxes. I personally really like that we have... Look, I think this is part of the reason that Trump had so many supporters. And one of the things that people loved about Trump when he was running and in his first administration and in this administration now, as we're even here, is the transparency. Is Mamdani he did an audit of the city and said, oh, wow, there's a lot of missing money and we are in a huge deficit. And we're going to have to do one of two things. We're either going to have to raise taxes on the rich who live in New York City, which I can't control, only the governor does. And if the governor doesn't agree to do that, then I'm going to have to raise property taxes. And that's just kind of what we got to do. And we're going to have to tighten our belts and really try to figure this out either with help or without. But
right.
How do you feel about that?
Looking at going after the middle class is where the money is. The rich,
disagree. Are you kidding me?
The rich have a lot of money, but if you confiscate all of their money, you could run the government for a couple of weeks. So the reality is the huge middle class taxing us.
Where do you consider the middle class to be? Like, what's the bracket?
I don't know, maybe 50 to 150, 200,000. That's
right.
in the middle. It's a middle family, depending on where you live.
Yeah.
Here in New Jersey, New York, California, 150,000 doesn't go very far.
The bottom 50%, I think it's even more. I think it's like the bottom 60% or something like that in the U.S. has 1 to 2% of the money in the country.
Right. It's the rest of us in the higher earning categories. They have to come to us because you could confiscate all of the wealthy people's money. It's not enough to run the government. So the idea that we get this idea, and I talk to so many different people that I love and care about, and they're like, it's not fair. If we need extra money, we're the richest country in the world. There are billionaires out there who could live my life 1,000 times over. We should take some of their money and make things work. And when you think about that, that's an easy answer. Go take their money because they have too much. I live on $50,000 a year and I make it. You make $80,000. Therefore, you have $30,000 more than you need. So therefore, you should pay $10,000 more. Who is to decide who has enough? I raised my family as best as I could. I didn't have as much money as other people. I wanted my kids to get a better education, go to a private school. At the time, it was $3,500 for one student and $5,000 for two. And I didn't have that money. I didn't have $5,000 extra. A lot of people in the school, they had enough to send 30 people to school. They just had extra money. They were wealthier. They had different kind of work, whatever. For me to send my kids was a decision my wife and I made. We sacrificed. We didn't go on bigger vacations. We bought lesser cars. I took a second job. She worked to do what we wanted to do. I didn't look and say, well, the guy up the street lives in a pretty big 5-bedroom house right by the ocean there. He's got way more than he needs. Let's go take some of his. Once we get into that mentality that because somebody has more than us, we have a right to go take their stuff because we need it, that is not appropriate because anybody with $1 more than you is doing better than you. And maybe you don't need that whole dollar, Andrew. I'm going to take half of it. Who's to reach into my pocket and take what's mine and say what my lifestyle should be?
But I think that's what makes a marginal tax rate so good, right? Is that the more you make, the more you pay.
And I'm not opposed to that.
Right.
I'm not opposed to the
Do you know
brackets.
what the highest tax bracket was in the 40s, which largely contributed to the boom in the 50s, which generally I think is what, when people say make America great
70s,
again.
80s, 90%.
Right. But I'm saying like, that's what you're thinking it was? It was 94.
94%.
Right.
It was very
those
high.
FDR who did that. And that largely contributed to the boom in the 50s that like everyone talks about with Make America Great Again, right? It's like, remember when people had money? That's the reason they had money, is because we had Rockefeller who had when you adjusted for inflation, just under the amount of money that Elon Musk has. And eventually FDR came in and was like, yeah, give me that. Like we're redistributing this to create art funding and stuff like that.
That's where that's not American. I disagree with complete redistribution.
Man, it really got us out of the Great Depression though.
I am not a wealthy person. I've done very well in my life by working many jobs, starting businesses, doing all kinds of things. I don't have millions of dollars like other people have. And I don't begrudge them that. I don't say, well, you know what? Uh, I say I live on $300,000 a year. Well, there's somebody living on 50 that says, Joe, you don't need 300,000. You can live on 200,000 very well. So you should pay another 100,000. Well, that's nice to say, but who is to say what I should live on? What I think well, your family should live on the ocean front. That's where I want my family to live. That's where my work has allowed me to draw income to allow my family to live on the ocean. Doesn't mean it's fair. There's no such thing as equality of outcome. There's equal opportunity.
I think what you're talking about, though, as well, is like there's to be fair to me, there's a nuance in between that, right? Like you don't have to say like, well, I make $300,000. The people who make, I don't know, 1,000 times that or more could probably stand to lose a little less, so that the poorest of us, the veterans I mentioned earlier who are living out on the street, there has to be a middle ground in that where we can. I really don't think that we don't really have a middle class anymore. Like that's part of the issue, is that the richest Americans have only gotten richer and the poorest Americans have only gotten poorer. The middle class that used to be here in the 50s and 60s, largely because of that 94% tax bracket, is mostly gone now. Especially in a place like New York City. It's largely you're rich or you're poor.
And we are regulated to death. We are ruled to death. We are taxed to death. If we take the restraints off of people's ability to make businesses, to do business, the capitalist system is the one system that has made for the best lifestyle on the planet ever for everybody. Is there inequity? There's always going to be inequity. But the reality is, what system is better that you can look at and say, oh, well, that socialist system, everyone's good. Socialism drags everyone down to a low common denominator, except for the political class who live a pretty good life. Capitalism has allowed a poor young person who lives in a very, very impoverished neighborhood to come up with a great idea, work really hard, and be a billionaire.
And that happened to like 10 guys.
Well, it's happened to a lot of people, and it happens to more and more. But you look immediately, what's the first thing that happens when you bring in a Democrat administration? They regulate, and what's that do? It costs businesses, and they fire people, they get rid of people, they shut down businesses, they stop making products because they can't afford to do it. You can't just reach into their pocket because all they do is raise the price then. Corporations don't pay taxes, people pay for those things. So when we release all of that, and you get a conservative administration in, they back up on regulation. They back up on government choking. You know, the wallaby fish, it lives in a pond, and we can't build a housing development there because it is wallaby fish. It's a beautiful thing, the wallaby fish.
Sure.
Pick it up and put it in a pond over there. If it don't live, it don't live.
Yeah.
But we start to regulate, and you destroy economic engine of America. And what happens? We see it repeated over and over. When you cut taxes, the government gets more revenue. Why? Because people get more money. They buy things. You tax them more, they stop buying things. I know a few years ago, I remember this was funny. I'm not in the world of yachts. I don't have a yacht. I could not afford a yacht. Would I like a yacht? I don't know. Maybe I would. They went in and they said, we're going to put a yacht tax on the rich people who buy yachts. And what do rich people do? Stop buying yachts. And the yacht places went out of business.
So what you're fighting for is a wealth tax then. That's what you're interested in.
No, I don't want a wealth tax.
No,
I'm saying that's not right.
That was my joke.
But
yeah.
you see how it decimated that industry,
Sure.
and people lost their regular
Oh,
people.
did the yacht sellers lose money?
The guys and girls who make the yachts,
Sure.
who glue the pieces together, who screw the boats together, they
Fair.
lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Because you wanted to go after those rich people. Those rich people go buy their boat somewhere else.
Yeah.
You're not affecting them. You can't have an economy built on people who hate other people because they have more, who want to take from other people just because they have.
I do think
That's
that
not gonna
the employee argument of that is not always a great one, because you find, like, someone once told me that Jimmy Carter was the worst president we've ever had because we didn't have a war. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I worked in the military industry. And so like I was an engineer building, battleships, and I didn't have a job all of a sudden. And I'm like, that's hard for you. A lot of people's kids didn't die though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, oh,
And so
sure,
for me, like, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I feel the same way about, when Obamacare was put in place and people were like, but what are all the people who work for insurance companies going to do? And I'm like, get a different job if it was, if it went through the way it was supposed to go through as a united or rather a universal healthcare program. And, we find the same discussions about coal mining. And it's like, well, what are the coal miners going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, work somewhere else.
Right.
I just think there's a way to take more money from the people in the top 7% who have half of the money in this entire country and redistribute it at least to the people who are struggling to eat. There must be a way to do that.
And I think there is a way. You cut back on government. You cut back on the giveaway programs. You cut back on the nonsense. And and I say this seriously to a degree. You know, we're talking about full disclosure now on UFOs. You don't think they really have $12,000 toilet seats, do you? We have to have black ops so we can take care of
I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I guess that funding went to something, but it's actually
else,
something
But it's actually
else.
black ops.
I
And I'm
see.
using the UFO as an analogy.
Sure.
But the reality is there's a lot of money out there. Where's our priorities? What are we spending it on? We only have so much. We can't just keep spending and spend because we want to do good. We argue when we fight. Take care of Americans. I agree. Take care of Americans first. Then figure out, what do we need in our country? We need engineers. So we go find engineers if we don't have enough. They can bring something to the table. You can't just open the door and let everybody come in because it's better here. That is draining resources from the soldier who's living in a car, who served our country. And there's no money for him, but other people are living in the Waldorf Astoria. Right? I don't begrudge those people. And for all those people, like crayon eaters out there who are sitting there, he hates people. I don't hate anybody. I love everybody. And I've said it 13 times already today.
Yeah, but they hate you.
If I was, and I know people on the left are a little, they spitting and screaming is crazy. If I was in one of those countries and I had a family, I would want to come here too. I understand that. For the good and decent people who just want a better life, I get it. But you can't just walk in the front door. My house is bigger and better than yours, and I have a beautiful built-in pool. You don't just open my front door and come in and say, well, come on, kids, we're going to swim in Joe's pool today because he got one.
To bring it back around real quick, I don't think that's what Mamdani is doing by raising the property tax.
No, I don't think he is.
We got off track a little bit.
I think we did. And the reality with the property tax, he's going to go back to them, and Governor Hochul knows she can't just keep raising taxes because then she's going to have a problem electorally.
Yeah.
Because people don't want their taxes to go up. Mamdani had a great idea. He's going to give away free this and free that. It goes along with all the socialist ideology. It sounds good. It sounds great. It's not realistic. You can't give away things for free. Somebody has to pay for it. And when you talk about, how many rich people have extra money, the highest earners pay 40, 50% of all taxes. And there's whole swaths of people at the bottom pay nothing. So they got to pay their fair share. Well, how much more? They have to, well, they have more and they should pay more. We already have that in place. You can't just keep taking because they have more. We have to find a different way to do our expenditures, cut back on certain things. And, it cuts back on programs. Well, I don't know. We have to figure something because it's not working the way it is. And I'm not going to disagree with that. We need to take care of our veterans, and homeless people should not be living in the street. We should be able to help people, but it should be a help up, not a handout.
Yeah, I hear you. For me, part of the difficulty is I just don't see, the Trump administration now is saying like, affordability was never an issue, or we fixed affordability and now it's all great. And I just am like, I don't see that,
Yeah, and I have to say that conversation affordability, it's a platitude that's been thrown up for people to jump on, but it's not affordable.
Yeah.
Things are not affordable. When I bought my first house, it was $100,000. My house is now ridiculous, and that was hard to afford.
Yeah.
That to get a mortgage, it was hard to afford that back in the day. Everything has gone up. We cannot disregard the fact that in the Biden administration, when we had 8, 9, 10% inflation, when that starts to come down, that doesn't mean we go back to pre-Biden era. It means we just go back down to the new normal because things have risen up. So to say, well, Trump didn't bring it back to $12. Well, it's never going to go back to $12. The key is to not have it go there in the first place by having policy, economic and social policy in place that doesn't drive inflation to begin with.
Well, hopefully we can get back there at some point. I believe that wraps up for our time today. This has been Perspective Exchange. I'm your co-host, Andrew Dunn.
And I'm Joe Pangaro. And remember, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
And remember, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but only if you throw it really hard. Thanks for watching. This is Perspective Exchange.